Everybody knows Larry David as the bald king of awkward disasters. One wrong look, one tiny complaint, one social rule nobody else noticed, and suddenly the room is on fire. He helped turn Seinfeld into TV history, then used Curb Your Enthusiasm to make his flaws look painfully funny. But away from the jokes, Larry's life was never just laughs. There was the broke comic, the impossible breakthrough, the private changes fans saw in pieces, the relationships that shaped him, the friendships that followed him, the feuds he never escaped, and losses that made his world feel smaller. Now, after Curb, fans are seeing Larry. Older, sharper, quieter in places. Join us as we look back at private life, career, controversies, heartbreaks, and new chapter behind television's uncomfortable legend. The Brooklyn Kid Who Saw Everything. Larry David's story did not begin in some bright Hollywood room. It began on July 2, 1947, in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, where Lawrence Gene David was born into a Jewish family with deep immigrant roots. His father, Mortimer Julius David, known as Morty, worked as a men's clothing manufacturer. His mother, Rose, was born Regina Brandis. Larry also had an older brother named Ken. On his father's side, the family had come from Germany to America during the 19th century. On his mother's side, the family was Polish-Jewish, connected to Ternopil, now in Ukraine. That background matters, because Larry's comedy always carried the sound of old family rooms, sharp comments, awkward silence, and people saying exactly what they should probably keep inside. He was not built like a movie star. He was built like the guy in the corner, noticing everything wrong with the room. He went to Sheepshead Bay High School and graduated in 1965. Years later, even after the school became the Frank J. Macchiarola Educational Complex, a sign with his photo still sat in one of the hallways. That is a funny image by itself. A kid who once looked like a regular Brooklyn student ended up becoming one of television's most famous complainers. After high school, Larry went to the University of Maryland, College Park. He joined Tau Epsilon Phi and graduated in 1970 with a Bachelor of Arts in History. College gave him something more important than a degree. He realized people laughed when he was simply being himself. That small discovery would change everything, but not quickly. After college, he joined the United States Army Reserve and trained as a petroleum storage specialist. Yet even that chapter had a Larry David ending. To avoid the final year of his 6-year enlistment, he paid a psychiatrist to write a letter saying he was unfit for duty. That was not a polished Hollywood origin. It was awkward, strange, and the first sign that Larry's life would never follow a normal script. Before the world got the joke, before Larry David became rich, famous, and quoted by millions, he spent years living the kind of life that either breaks a person or sharpens them. He worked as a stand-up comedian, but comedy did not pay the bills. So he also worked as a store clerk, limousine driver, and historian. Those jobs may sound random, but they fit the man who later built comedy from small details. Every customer, passenger, and strange social rule gave him something to notice. He lived in Manhattan Plaza, a federally subsidized housing complex in Hell's Kitchen. Across the hall lived Kenny Kramer, who later inspired Cosmo Kramer on Seinfeld. Even before fame, pieces of Larry's future were already standing outside his door. From 1980 to 1982, he became a writer and cast member on ABC's Fridays, where he worked with Michael Richards, the future Kramer. Then came Saturday Night Live. From 1984 to 1985, Larry wrote for the show and met Julia Louis-Dreyfus, but his time there was rough. Only one of his sketches made it to air, and it aired at 12:50 a.m., the final slot of the night. For most writers, that would be painful. For Larry, it became part of the legend. He quit during his first season after angrily criticizing the show to producer Dick Ebersol. Then, 2 days later, he returned like nothing had happened. That real moment later helped inspire the Seinfeld episode, The Revenge. He could also be heard heckling Michael McKean when McKean hosted SNL in 1984, and he appeared in a sketch when Howard Cosell hosted in 1985. By 1987, Larry was writing and performing for Way Off Broadway, hosted by Joy Behar. He was still not a star, but the pattern was clear. Every failure was quietly turning into the voice that would soon change television. The Seinfeld break that changed everything. In 1989, Larry David joined forces with Jerry Seinfeld, and television comedy quietly changed forever. Together, they created a pilot for NBC called The Seinfeld Chronicles. That pilot grew into Seinfeld, a show that became one of the most successful comedies in history. It later reached the top of TV Guide's list of the 50 greatest TV shows of all time, while Entertainment Weekly ranked it as the third best United States television show ever. But what made the show special was not only Jerry's stage style, it was Larry's mind. He brought the irritation, the rules, the arguments, and the feeling that ordinary life could become a courtroom over nothing. He was also the main inspiration for George Costanza, the insecure, angry bald man who turned every tiny problem into a full crisis. That is why George always felt so real. He was not just a character, he was a piece of Larry, pushed through another actor. Larry made occasional uncredited appearances on the show, too. He played small roles like Frank Costanza's cape-wearing lawyer, and he gave his voice to George Steinbrenner. He stayed mostly behind the scenes, but his fingerprints were everywhere. He wrote 62 episodes, including The Contest in 1992. That episode won him a Primetime Emmy Award and was later ranked by TV Guide as #1 on its list of TV's top 100 episodes of all time. That is not a small achievement. That is the kind of moment writers dream about. Yet Larry did not seem like a man made comfortable by success. He left Seinfeld amicably after the 7th season, then returned 2 years later to write the series finale in 1998. He also kept voicing Steinbrenner, but by then, Seinfeld was not just a show anymore. It was a giant machine. Larry had helped build it, and now he had to face the problem that follows every massive hit. Once the audience loves something that much, they also feel they own the ending. And that ending would follow Larry for years. The backlash that followed. Larry for years. The ending of Seinfeld became one of the most debated finales in television history. Larry had returned to write it, and the episode brought back many past characters for a trial built around the main group's behavior. Millions watched it, but not everyone loved it. In fact, the finale became a sore spot for fans, critics, and even people connected to the show. Jerry Seinfeld later admitted at a New Yorker event, "I sometimes think we really shouldn't have even done it," and added, "Big is always bad in comedy." But Larry did not fold under that criticism. Years later, he still defended the ending in his own stubborn way. In a 2014 conversation with Bill Simmons, Larry explained that finales are difficult because every viewer writes their own ending in their head. People imagine George doing one thing, Jerry and Elaine doing another, and then feel let down when the real version does not match. Larry said he and Jerry were not interested in an emotional ride. That answer says a lot about him. He did not want soft music and tears. He wanted the characters to stay true to who they were. Around this same period, Larry also tried film. He wrote and directed the 1998 comedy Sour Grapes, about two cousins fighting over a casino jackpot. It did not become a commercial or critical success. Roger Ebert hated it so much that he wrote, "Scene after scene crashes to the floor," and said, "I can't easily remember a film I've enjoyed less." For most people, that kind of review would be crushing. Larry turned it into fuel. Later, Curb would feature a restaurant critic named Portico, a clear jab at Ebert using a thumbs-up and thumbs-down system. Larry's character then hits him with a dodgeball, breaking both thumbs. That was the Larry David method. Hurt feelings did not disappear. They became jokes, and soon his whole life would become the setup. When Larry David became the joke. After Seinfeld, Larry could have disappeared into wealth. Instead, he did something stranger. On October 17, 1999, HBO aired his one-hour special, Larry David, Curb Your Enthusiasm. That special led to the series Curb Your Enthusiasm, which premiered on October 15, 2000. The idea was simple, but risky. Larry would play a fictional version of himself, living after the fortune he made from Seinfeld. He was semi-retired, rich enough to avoid normal problems, yet somehow still trapped by every small rule of daily life. The show used story outlines only a few pages long, and the actors improvised the dialogue from there. From the 5th season onward, more writers helped, but the center stayed the same. Larry has said his character is what he would be like in real life if he had no social awareness and no sensitivity. That line explains the whole show. Curb was not about a hero. It was about a man saying the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person. and then acting shocked when the world pushed back. The phrase Larry David moment entered pop culture because people understood it. It meant one of those awkward situations that somehow gets worse because nobody knows how to escape it. The show was often described as saying the things nobody wants to say, but sometimes wishes they could. His on-screen world included Cheryl Hines as his wife Cheryl, Jeff Garlin as his manager and best friend Jeff, and Susie Essman as Jeff's explosive wife, Susie. Richard Lewis, Wanda Sykes, Bob Einstein, Ted Danson, and Mary Steenburgen became part of the strange orbit around him. Curb earned major acclaim with 30 Primetime Emmy nominations, 1 Emmy win, and a Golden Globe win. It also kept bringing Seinfeld history back into Larry's world. Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Jason Alexander, Jerry Seinfeld, and Michael Richards all appeared, with Season 7 building toward a Seinfeld reunion. Away from the series, he kept testing other rooms. He starred in Woody Allen's Whatever Works in 2009, appeared on Entourage, The Marriage Ref, and The Three Stooges, then co-wrote and starred in Clear History. In 2015, his Broadway play, Fish in the Dark, opened, broke advance sale records, and passed his role to Alexander. Larry had turned his own public image into a comedy machine, but the machine was about to get personal. The wife, the daughters, and the softer side. Away from the cameras, Larry David's personal life was quieter than the character he played. He lived in Pacific Palisades in Los Angeles, California, far from the Brooklyn streets where his story began. In 1993, he married Lori Leonard. Their marriage lasted until 2007, and they had 2 daughters together, Cassie David and Romy David. That part of Larry's life showed a different side of him. Fans knew the irritated face and the loud argument, but at home, he was also a husband and father. In 2005, Larry and Lori even became contributing bloggers at the Huffington Post. Their lives were public enough to be noticed, but not flashy in the way people expect from Hollywood couples. Larry's family circle also reached into his work. His niece, actress Julie Claire, appeared in both Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm. His daughters became part of his public life too. Because they were Hannah Montana fans, Larry and his daughters appeared as themselves in the episode My Best Friend's Boyfriend, where they waited for a table at a fancy restaurant. It was a small cameo, but it showed how his family life sometimes slipped into his comedy world. Larry also built a life around his interests. He is an atheist. He loves sports. As a New Yorker, he supports the New York Jets, Yankees, Knicks, and Rangers. He also supports the Democratic Party. In 2010, he wrote a New York Times article criticizing the extension of the Bush tax cuts for wealthy people, ending with sarcastic thanks to President Barack Obama for approving it. That mix of politics, sports, irritation, and family became part of his real public identity. He was never only the man yelling on television. He was also a father, a fan, a voter, and a person with habits that sounded almost too perfect for Curb. But the biggest private shift was coming, and it would not stay private for long. When Larry David's marriage became material. In 2007, Larry and Lori David separated after 14 years of marriage. Lori filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, while a spokesman called the split very amicable. But when your life is tied to a show like Curb Your Enthusiasm, even a real divorce can start to feel like an episode. That same year, the show mirrored the breakup through Larry's fictional marriage to Cheryl. In the episode, Cheryl calls Larry from a plane that might crash. She is scared and wants to say goodbye. But Larry is distracted because the TiVo repairman is at the house. He tells her to call back in 10 minutes. Cheryl survives the flight, but the marriage does not. When she returns, she tells him, "I'm leaving, Larry. I can't do this anymore." Then comes the line that cuts deeper than a normal joke. She says people always ask how she stays with him, and she tells them there is another side they do not see. But then she realizes there's no other side. That fictional moment hit harder because the real-life timing was so close. Larry had always pulled comedy from life, but this was different. It was not just grocery store banter becoming Seinfeld. It was marital collapse becoming cringe comedy. In the show, friends choose sides. Favorite places become uncomfortable. Larry suddenly feels the cost of his own behavior. In real life, Larry would later admit that the split changed more than his home life. It changed how people talked about his money too. But that part of the story would become its own strange chapter later. Lori seemed to take the Curb version with humor. She told Rolling Stone, "I think he's happy now," and joked that for a man spending endless hours on a golf course, it is best not to have a wife waiting at home. That line was funny, but it also sounded final, and once Curb moved past the marriage, the jokes only got sharper. When Larry David crossed the line, Curb Your Enthusiasm became famous because it pushed into places polite comedy usually avoided. Sometimes Larry's character looked brave, sometimes he looked awful. In Season 1, the group put him inside an incest survivors group with an ex-girlfriend, where he made up a false abuse story and dragged his innocent Uncle Leo into the mess. In Crazy Eyes Killa, he repeated the N-word while trying to bond with a rapper. In The Survivor, a Holocaust survivor and a reality show survivor contestant argued over who had suffered more. In Kamikaze Bingo, Larry insulted a Japanese man's father for surviving his kamikaze mission. In The Satyr, he invited a registered sex offender to Passover because the man was bald, liked golf, helped with groceries, and praised him. The discomfort was the point, but the point was often dangerous. Other episodes went even further. In The Korean Bookie, Larry wrongly assumed a missing dog had been served as food at a wedding, exposing the ugly stereotype behind his own suspicion. In another episode, he repeated the N-word after hearing it in a hospital bathroom, and black characters kept overhearing him. Funkhauser's crazy sister turned dark when Jeff betrayed Susie and helped send an innocent woman back to a mental institution. The Bare Midriff built a whole story around an assistant's exposed stomach, with the joke clearly mocking her body. Palestinian Chicken, one of Larry's favorites, threw religion, desire, chicken, Jewish identity, and the Israel-Palestine conflict into one explosive situation. People still argue over why Curb survived so many risky ideas. A 2020 piece asked why the show had not faced a major woke backlash. The answer was partly that the joke was usually on Larry himself. He was not the wise man in the room. He was the problem. Still, some moments remain hard to imagine airing the same way now. Larry's comedy kept walking the edge, and every edge has a drop. Fights, grudges, and old scores. Larry David never looked like a man built to forgive quickly. His career is full of old clashes that somehow became comedy. The Sour Grapes revenge against Roger Ebert was only one example. Richard Lewis was another, though that one carried real affection. Larry and Richard had known each other since childhood, when they met at a youth sports camp. Lewis remembered, "I disliked him intensely. We were arch rivals." Years later, that tension became one of Curb's best relationships. On screen, they argued like enemies who could never fully leave each other alone. That mix of love and irritation gave the show a real pulse. Another strange clash came from basketball. In a classic 2001 Curb episode called Shaq, Larry sat courtside at a Lakers game with Richard Lewis and stretched his legs onto the court. Shaquille O'Neal tripped over his feet and was injured. Larry insisted it was an accident, but the crowd hated him. The funny twist was that everyone then avoided Larry, and he loved the piece. In 2026, Shaq still joked about it during coverage of a Knicks victory over the San Antonio Spurs in Game 4 of the NBA Finals. When the panel pointed out Larry at Madison Square Garden, Shaq said, "I don't like him. He tripped me." It was a fake television injury turned into a 25-year grudge, but the biggest old wound still came from Seinfeld. In 2024, at PaleyFest, Larry answered finale critics with "FKQ" and added, "You didn't like the first one? FKQ." That mattered because the Curb finale had clearly echoed Seinfeld. Both put the main character on trial. Both brought past people back to testify. But Curb gave Larry a mistrial, letting him tell Jerry, "This is how we should have ended the finale." Jeff Schaffer said the audience was being pranked in slow motion. Larry had taken his most famous criticism and turned it into the final joke. But outside scripted comedy, his public image was changing too. When Larry David entered the political circus, Larry David's public image changed again in 2015 when he began playing Bernie Sanders on Saturday Night Live. The fit was almost too perfect. Both men had the same cranky rhythm, the same sharp Brooklyn energy, and the same way of sounding angry, even when making sense. Larry made several guest appearances as Sanders during the 2016 and 2020 presidential cycles. He also hosted SNL on February 6, 2016, with musical guest 1975 and a cameo from Sanders himself. He returned as host on November 4, 2017, with Miley Cyrus as musical guest. Then came the strangest twist. In 2017, PBS's Finding Your Roots revealed that Larry and Sanders were distantly related. Sanders told Larry the news, and Larry said, "I was very happy about that." He also said, "I thought there must have been some connection." The connection was real, though distant. Sanders was his sixth cousin once removed. Of course, Larry still found a way to complain. On January 8, 2020, he joked on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert that he would beg Sanders to drop out so he would not have to keep flying from Los Angeles to do SNL. He added that when Sanders had a heart attack, he thought that would be it, but he's indestructible. Then he said if Sanders won, it would be great for the country, but terrible for him. Political comedy also brought heat. During an SNL monologue, Larry joked about Hollywood sexual harassment scandals and made remarks about concentration camps that drew anger from the Anti-Defamation League, which called the monologue offensive, insensitive, and unfunny. Later, during a sketch as Sanders, he gave a tacit apology by joking that comics who think concentration camp jokes are okay should rot in hell. Even when Larry tried to clean up a controversy, he did it through another uncomfortable joke. By then, fame had made every part of him fair game. The strange price of being Larry David. Larry David's success made him one of the richest figures in television comedy, but even his money became part of the joke. In 2013, Charlie Rose estimated his net worth at around $500 million. Later estimates ranged from about $400 million to $900 million, and by 2026, the number was placed around $450 to $550 million. Most of that wealth came from Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm syndication. Seinfeld alone had reportedly brought in $3.1 billion in rerun fees by 2013, and Larry was estimated to have earned $250 million from syndication in 1998 alone. Curb even mocked the rumors in The Shrimp Incident when an HBO executive yelled, "If you want shrimp, take your $475 million. Go buy a shrimp boat." But Larry pushed back against the wild numbers. In 2015, he told CBS, "I have a lot of money," but said the figures out there were crazy, especially after divorce reduced his fortune. Still, money never softened his image. He remained the irritated rich man who somehow made wealth look inconvenient. His comedy roots also stayed clear. He named Woody Allen, Mel Brooks, Phil Silvers, Abbott and Costello, Jackie Mason, Alan King, Don Rickles, and Mad Magazine as influences. But family history later gave him another awkward public moment. On Finding Your Roots, Larry learned that a great-great-grandfather, Henry Bernstein, had moved from Bavaria to Mobile, Alabama, joined the Confederacy, and owned 2 slaves. In 2026, Jimmy Kimmel joked about it, and Larry shot back, "Oh, I guess that makes you better than me, right?" Even family history became another awkward Larry David moment, when Larry David shocked everyone again. By 2024 and 2025, Larry David was no longer only getting attention for scripted comedy. Real life had become another stage for his outbursts. On February 1, 2024, he appeared on NBC's Today, while Elmo was also there. Elmo had gone viral online after asking people how they were doing, and the replies were filled with sadness, stress, and emotional exhaustion. Elmo then became part of a public conversation about mental health. Larry, waiting for his own interview, suddenly walked onto the set and grabbed Elmo's face. The hosts gasped. Savannah Guthrie said, "Larry, you've gone too far this time." Larry later apologized on the show, saying, "Elmo, I just want to apologize. I'm really sorry." Elmo accepted. But later that day, on Late Night with Seth Meyers, Larry explained that Elmo had been going on about mental health, and he could not take another second. He said, "I throttled him." Then he added, "I would do it again." It was shocking, childish, and exactly the kind of thing people expected from his public character, which made it even stranger. Then came another firestorm in 2025. The New York Times published Larry's essay, My Dinner with Adolf, on April 21st. The piece imagined a fictional 1939 dinner with Adolf Hitler and used dark humor to show how charm can hide evil. It clearly mirrored Bill Maher's warm comments after having dinner with Donald Trump, where Maher described Trump as gracious and much more self-aware than he lets on. Larry's essay ended with the narrator giving Hitler a Nazi salute, a brutal, satirical jab. Maher fired back, calling it kind of insulting to 6 million dead Jews. But Larry had never been afraid of a feud, especially when he thought someone was falling for charm over truth. The older he got, the less filtered he seemed to become. But the biggest change was still happening back where fans knew him best. The quiet sadness after Curb. The final season of Curb Your Enthusiasm premiered in January 2024, closing a show that had followed Larry David for more than 2 decades. For fans, it was not just another ending. It felt like the closing of a whole comic world. Larry later said at PaleyFest that making Curb was the most fun I could ever have possibly had doing anything. He said writing and filming it gave him more fun than he could imagine having in his life. That rare softness mattered, because Larry usually hid emotion behind complaints. But the end of Curb made the story feel heavier in a way fans could feel without anyone saying it out loud. Time had moved. The show was over. The familiar rhythm was gone. And some of the people who helped make that world so alive were no longer there in the same way. Bob Einstein, who played Marty Funkhauser, had already become impossible to separate from the show's memory. Richard Lewis had also given the series one of its most real friendships, full of arguments, history, and strange affection. As those pieces changed, Larry's comedy started to look less like simple jokes and more like a record of time passing. Still, Larry did not disappear. In 2017, he was introduced to producer Ashley Underwood at a birthday party for Sacha Baron Cohen, and they married in 2020. By this next chapter, he was still married, still working, and still finding ways to turn discomfort into television. In July 2025, he announced a return to HBO with a 6-episode sketch comedy series about overlooked figures and absurd moments in United States history. He would co-write and executive produce it with longtime collaborator Jeff Schaffer, who would also direct. The project was made with Barack and Michelle Obama's Higher Ground Productions and planned for America's 250th anniversary. Larry said he was returning to television with a heavy heart after Curb. Life, Larry, and the Pursuit of Unhappiness. An Almost History of America was set for June 2026, bringing him back to HBO with a strange new idea, a sharp angle, and one more reason to watch closely. What really defined Larry David? The Seinfeld millions, the Curb disasters, or the uncomfortable truth behind the laughs? And after Curb, is Larry David's best chapter already behind him, or is the old troublemaker just getting warmed up? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more incredible stories from Hollywood's fascinating history. See you next time.